The first thing you hear is the sound. The tinny, compressed audio of a voicemail, struggling through a tiny speaker. It's thick with panic. A raw, ragged edge to a woman's voice tearing through the silence. My mother's voice. Leo, pick up the phone. Where are you? They called. Mia, there was an accident. She's at the hospital. She was walking alone because nobody was there for her. This is your fault. All your fault. The message ends with a choked sob, cutting off into a dead, chilling silence. But that was later. Before the silence, before the sirens, before everything fell apart, there was just the noise, the constant, unending noise of my mother's demands, vibrating in my pocket, buzzing in my backpack, echoing in my head. It was a Tuesday in early April, a few weeks before the accident. I was in Mr. Harrison's U.S. history class, trying to focus on the nuances of the Gilded Age. The air in the room was thick with the scent of old books and teenage boredom. Outside, a gentle Ohio spring was trying to break through the gray clouds. Inside, my world was confined to the drone of the lecture and the insistent, angry buzz of my phone inside my backpack. BZZZ, BZZZ, BZZZ. I tried to ignore it. I focused on the whiteboard, on the way Mr. Harrison's chalk squeaked as he drew a complicated diagram of industrial monopolies. But the vibration was like a physical touch, a persistent tap on my shoulder from 100 miles away. I could feel the eyes of my classmates. Sarah Jensen in front of me, Kyle Martinez beside me. They weren't looking at me. Not really. But I could feel their awareness. It's Leo's phone again. I risked a glance down at my bag. Through the mesh pocket, I could see the screen light up. Mom, don't forget to pick up oat milk on your way home. The unsweetened vanilla kind. A minute passed. Mom, Leo? Another minute. Mom, are you seeing these? BZZZ. BZZZ. Mr. Harrison paused, his hand hovering over the board. He sighed. A quiet, weary sound that held no real anger, only resignation. Leo, is everything all right over there? The heat rose in my cheeks. Sorry, Mr. Harrison. It's nothing. Make sure it stays nothing, he said, his voice gentle but firm. This is important. He turned back to the board, and under the cover of my desk, I unzipped my bag just enough to slide my hand in. My fingers found the phone. The screen was a bright, demanding rectangle in the darkness of my backpack. Mom, I know you have your phone on you. Don't ignore me. Mom, answer me. My thumb moved instinctively to the side of the phone and found the little switch. I flicked it down. The screen went dark. The vibrations ceased. A satisfying, physical click that promised a few hours of peace. A wall. A boundary. A tiny piece of my day that was finally my own. As I pulled my hand back, the memory of my dad's voice surfaced, as clear as if he were sitting next to me. We were in his garage a few months ago, the air smelling of sawdust and fresh coffee. He was showing me how to fix the chain on my bike, his hands steady and capable. He'd seen the exhaustion on my face after a week at my mom's. You have to set a boundary, Leo, he'd said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. Your mom, she loves you, but her anxiety runs the show. She thinks if she isn't in constant contact, the world will fall apart. She gets mad. I'd mumbled, staring at the bike chain. She says I'm being disrespectful. Dad had stopped and looked at me, his eyes serious. It's not disrespect. It's focus. You're in school to learn, not to be her personal assistant. The school agrees. Your teachers agree. Hell, I'm your father, and I agree. When you're in class, your phone goes on silent. Period. When you're done for the day, you can check it. Your time is your own. You have a right to that. He had handed me the wrench. Don't ever feel guilty for protecting your peace. Protecting my peace. It sounded so simple, but it felt like an act of war. Every time I silenced my phone, I was bracing for the battle that would come later. The guilt trips, the sighs, the dramatic declarations of how I didn't care about the family. When the final bell rang, I left school and started the walk to my mom's house. For those 2 weeks a month, it was my home, but it never truly felt like it. Dad's house was lived in, a little messy, filled with the comfortable clutter of my photo equipment and his woodworking tools. Mom's house, the one she shared with my stepfather Mark, was immaculate, too immaculate. The floors gleamed, the countertops were clear, and the silence was heavy, judgmental. It was a showroom, not a home. I walked in the door and was met with that very silence. Mark was on the couch, scrolling through his phone, a ghost in his own home. He grunted a hello without looking up. My mom, Sarah, emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile was tight. "Oh, there you are," she said, her tone just a little too bright. "I was beginning to think you'd gotten lost. I texted you. I was in class." "Mom, my phone was on silent," I said, the pre-rehearsed line feeling flimsy even to my own ears. She sighed, a theatrical puff of air. "Of course. School. I just needed you to pick up Mia from her Girl Scouts thing, and the takeout I ordered from the Olive Branch, and I forgot to get my prescription from the pharmacy." She ticked them off on her fingers as if they were simple, reasonable requests. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 5. Homework was already piling up. "Mom, I have a massive history paper due Friday." Mark finally looked up from his phone. "Listen to your mother, Leo. It's about helping out. Family takes priority. Family takes priority." That was her favorite line. It was a shield she used for every demand, a justification for every intrusion. It didn't mean we should support each other. It meant that her needs, her schedule, her poor planning, were everyone else's emergency. I felt my shoulders slump. The little bit of peace I had claimed by silencing my phone was gone, replaced by the familiar weight of obligation. "Fine," I said, dropping my heavy backpack by the door. "Where do I need to go first?" Her smile became genuine then, the smile of someone who had gotten their way. That's my boy. I hated that smile. It wasn't just about the errands. It was about the complete disregard for my time, for my life. It was as if my 16 years of existence were just a resource for her to manage. The worst instance had been last winter. I was walking home from a friend's house, the cold Ohio wind biting at my face. My phone rang. It was Mom. "Hey, sweetie," she'd said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I need you to do me a huge favor. Mia's basketball practice just ended, but Mark and I are stuck in traffic. Can you swing by the community center and pick her up?" I stopped walking, looking around. The community center was a 15-minute walk in the opposite direction. "Mom, that's not on my way at all. I'm almost home." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's a nice day for a walk," she'd countered. It was 30 degrees and spitting rain. "We'll be home soon. Just go get her. I don't want her waiting alone." So I did it. I turned around, my boots crunching on the salted pavement, and walked all the way to the community center. I found Mia, my 10-year-old stepsister, sitting on a bench inside, happily reading a book. She was perfectly fine. I told her I was walking her home, and then we waited and waited. We stood outside in the cold because the center was closing. An hour passed, an entire hour of me standing on a damp curb, my hands numb, my backpack feeling like it was filled with bricks, while Mia, bless her heart, tried to make conversation. She wasn't the problem. She never was. When my mom's pristine white SUV finally pulled up, there was no apology, no thank you for waiting in the freezing rain for an hour. She just rolled down the window, her face a mask of casual annoyance. "Get in. You too," she'd said. "Dinner's going to be late." Later that night, as I was trying to thaw out in my room, she'd knocked on the door. "Leo," she'd said, poking her head in, "you seemed really grumpy earlier. You should try to be more cheerful when you're helping out. It makes a better impression." I had just stared at her, speechless. It wasn't about helping. It wasn't about Mia's safety or traffic. It was about her convenience. I was a tool to be used, a box to be checked on her endless to-do list. My feelings, my time, my freezing hands, they didn't even register. That was the pattern. A demand disguised as a request, a guilt trip if I hesitated, and a total lack of acknowledgement for my effort. I was living in a constant state of low-level resentment, a simmering anger that I had to keep pushing down just to get through the week. So on that Tuesday afternoon in April, as I headed out the door again with a list of chores, I felt that same old bitterness creeping up my throat. I was tired of being the reliable one, the one who always caved, tired of the endless noise. I got on my bike, the cool air feeling good on my flushed face. For a moment, I imagined just not stopping, just riding past the pharmacy, past the restaurant, and heading straight for the highway, for the quiet solitude of my dad's house a town over. But I didn't. I was a good son. I was a good brother. I did what I was told. I turned my handlebars toward the pharmacy. Another task to complete. Another piece of my afternoon gone. I didn't know it then, but my quiet compliance was reinforcing a dangerous expectation. My mother didn't see a son who was trying his best. She saw a system that worked, a button she could press to solve her problems. And in a few weeks, she would press that button again, assuming I would be there to answer. Only next time, my phone would be on silent, and a little girl would be waiting alone. The day it happened was a Friday, April 27th. The air had that perfect late spring feel to it, warm enough for a t-shirt, but with a cool breeze that rustled the new leaves on the maple trees, lining the streets of our town. It was the kind of day that made you feel alive, hopeful, the kind of day you'd remember, though not for the reasons you'd want. I had my after-school photography club meeting that day. It was my sanctuary, the one place where I felt completely myself. The world went quiet when I looked through the viewfinder of my camera. All the noise from my mother, the tension at her house, the weight of expectation, it all just melted away. It was just me, the light, and the subject. Mr. Davison, our club advisor, had given us a new assignment, fleeting moments. We were supposed to capture images that felt temporary, like they could disappear in an instant. I was completely absorbed. I spent an hour in the school's small, overgrown courtyard, trying to capture the way the wind made the dandelions dance, their seeds catching the afternoon sun like tiny golden sparks before being carried away. My phone, as always, was deep in my backpack, switched to silent. It was a habit now, a ritual. School bag on the floor, phone on silent, peace engaged. My dad's advice had become my mantra. It was the only way I could carve out any space for myself in a life that felt increasingly not my own. The meeting ran late. We were all sharing our best shots, projecting them onto the screen in the darkened classroom. There was a camaraderie in that room, a shared passion that was a welcome relief from the social hierarchies of high school. When I finally packed up my gear, the school was nearly empty. The hallways echoed with the sound of my own footsteps. I stepped outside into the golden light of the late afternoon. It was almost 5:30. I felt a pang of guilt for not checking my phone, but I pushed it away. For once, I had allowed myself to be completely present in something I loved. Whatever messages were waiting, they could wait a little longer. I pulled out my phone as I started the walk home. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications. It was a familiar sight, but the sheer volume was unusual. My stomach tightened. There were 3 missed calls from Mom, and a string of texts. I scrolled to the first one, sent at 3:45 p.m. Mom, hey, I need you to pick me up today. Her troop is finishing their camping skills event at Miller Park. Be there by 4:30. My eyes scanned the time. 4:30. An hour ago. A familiar wave of annoyance washed over me. Another last-minute plan. Another assumption that I was available. Miller Park was on the other side of town. A solid 30-minute walk from school. There was no way I could have made it even if I had seen the message right after school. The next text came at 4:40 p.m. Mom, Leo, where are you? Mia's leader just called. All the other parents are there. Then, at 5 p.m., "Mom, are you kidding me? Pick up your phone. This isn't funny." The final notification wasn't a text. It was a voicemail, left at 5:15 p.m. A red icon screamed for my attention. My thumb trembled slightly as I pressed it. The sound that filled my ears was the one I would hear in my nightmares for months to come. It was my mother's voice, but a version I had never heard before, stripped of all its usual passive aggression and replaced with raw, undiluted terror and rage. "Leo, pick up the phone. Where are you?" They called. "Mia, there was an accident. She was walking alone because nobody was there for her. She's at the hospital. This is your fault. All your fault." The world tilted. The beautiful spring afternoon, the golden light, the peaceful feeling from my photo club, it all vanished, sucked into a black hole of panic that opened up in my chest. My legs felt weak. "Mia, accident, hospital, your fault." The words echoed in my head, a vicious, repeating loop. I started running. I didn't know where I was going exactly, just that I had to get to my mom's house. My lungs burned. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every step was a fresh wave of dread. What happened? How bad was it? Was she okay? When I burst through the front door of my mom's house, I was met with an eerie silence. The immaculate living room was empty. The kitchen was spotless. No one was home. I called out, my voice cracking, "Mom, Mark." Only the hum of the refrigerator answered me. I pulled my phone out again, my hands shaking so badly I could barely type. I called my mom. It went straight to voicemail. I called Mark. Straight to voicemail. I even tried my dad, but he didn't pick up either. I was completely alone with the screaming voice in my head. I collapsed onto the couch, my backpack falling to the floor with a heavy thud. I didn't know what to do. Go to the hospital? Which one? I had no information. All I had was that horrible, accusatory voicemail. "Your fault." So I waited. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the pristine living room. I tried to do my history homework, to find some semblance of normalcy, but the words on the page just swam in front of my eyes. Every car that drove by sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Was it them? It was almost 8 p.m. when they finally came home. I heard the key in the lock and jumped to my feet. The door opened, and my mom walked in, followed by Mark. They looked depleted. My mom's face was pale and tear-streaked, her eyes red and puffy. Mark just looked gray and grim. "Mom," I asked, my voice barely a whisper, "what happened? Is Mia okay?" My mother looked at me, and her expression was terrifying. It wasn't just sadness or exhaustion. It was a cold, hard fury. "No, Leo," she said, her voice flat and dead. "She is not okay. No thanks to you." She walked past me and dropped her purse on the kitchen counter with a loud smack. Mark stood by the door like a silent, imposing statue. What happened?" I stammered, following her. She whirled around to face me. "What happened is that Mia waited for you. Her troop leader said she waited for nearly half an hour, insisting her big brother was coming. And when you didn't show up, she decided to walk home on her own because she didn't want to be a bother. She's 10. Leo, 10. She doesn't know about busy streets or distracted drivers." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "She was crossing a street about a mile from here," Mark said, his voice low and gravelly. "Some kid on an electric bike wasn't paying attention. He hit her. Hard." My mom's voice broke, a raw edge of pain cutting through the anger. "She has a broken leg, Leo, a clean break in her tibia. But her other knee, the doctors say there's severe ligament damage. They're not sure if it will ever be the same. She might have a limp for the rest of her life." The room felt like it was closing in on me. A limp. Forever. Because of a bike accident. Because she was walking home alone. "I told you it wasn't my fault," I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I didn't see the message. I was in my club meeting. I never agreed to pick her up. That was when the fuse blew. My mother's face, which had been pale with grief, turned a dark, blotchy red. "Not your fault," she shrieked, her voice rising with every word. "Not your fault. Your sister is lying in a hospital bed, and you're standing there talking about your little club? About what you did or didn't agree to? Do you have any idea how selfish you sound?" "It's not selfish," I shot back, my own fear and guilt twisting into anger. "It's the truth. You can't just text me and expect me to drop everything. You know I have club on Fridays. We've talked about this 100 times. Family takes priority," she screamed, stabbing a finger in my direction. "That is the rule in this house. Your sister needed you, and you were too busy with your little hobby to even check your phone. A real brother would have been there. A real son would feel some remorse, some shred of guilt. But you just stand there defending yourself. It's disgusting." Mark stepped forward, placing a hand on my mom's shoulder. "Sarah, calm down." He looked at me, his eyes cold. "But she's right. Leo, your lack of empathy is pretty shocking." I felt like I had been slapped. Lack of empathy? I felt sick to my stomach for Mia. I hated that she was hurt, but their logic was so twisted, so profoundly unfair, that I couldn't just stand there and accept it. They weren't just sad and scared. They were looking for someone to blame, and I was the easiest target. "This is insane," I said, shaking my head. "This happened because you didn't have a proper plan. You just assumed I'd do it. You didn't call. You didn't confirm. You just sent a text and expected the world to rearrange itself for you. That's not my fault. It's yours." The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I had crossed a line. My mother stared at me, her mouth hanging open in disbelief. Then her face crumpled, and she let out a gut-wrenching sob. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was a cry of pure, wounded rage. "Get out of my sight," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just go to your room. I can't even look at you right now." I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and fled up the stairs, the sound of her crying following me. I slammed my door shut and leaned against it, my body shaking. The walls of my pristine, temporary room felt like they were pressing in on me. Downstairs, I could hear her voice rising again, this time on the phone. She was screaming. I realized with a jolt that she was talking to my dad. "He's just like you, David. No sense of responsibility. The school has him brainwashed with all this boundary nonsense. And now look what's happened. My daughter is in the hospital because of it." A fight was brewing, another battle in the endless war of my parents' divorce. And I was, as always, trapped in the middle. But this time was different. This wasn't about forgotten chores or missed calls. This was about a little girl in a hospital bed, and I was being handed the blame like a life sentence. The house fell silent after my mother hung up on my dad. But it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a sealed tomb. I stayed in my room, the door shut, listening. I could hear the low murmur of her voice downstairs, intertwined with Mark's deeper tones. They weren't yelling anymore. It was worse. It was the quiet, intense sound of judgment being passed, of a verdict being finalized. My verdict. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the voicemail replaying in my head on a loop. "Your fault. Your fault. Your fault." Every time a floorboard creaked downstairs, I flinched. I felt like a stranger in this house, an intruder, or worse, a criminal. The next morning, the silence was still there, thick and curdled. I crept downstairs, my footsteps unnaturally loud in the quiet. My mom was in the kitchen, making coffee. She moved with a stiff, deliberate slowness, her back to me. Mark was at the table, reading the news on his tablet. Neither of them looked up when I entered. I mumbled a good morning. Mark grunted in response, his eyes never leaving the screen. My mother said nothing. She just continued to move around the kitchen, her movements radiating a cold, controlled fury. She poured coffee into a mug for Mark, then one for herself. She put the pot back on the warmer without offering me any. It was such a small thing, but it was a clear message. "You are not one of us. You are on the outside." I got a bowl from the cupboard and poured myself some cereal. I sat at the table, as far from Mark as possible. The only sounds were the scrape of my spoon against the ceramic bowl and the tap-tap-tap of Mark's finger on his tablet. The silence was a weapon, and my mom was wielding it with expert precision. It was designed to make me feel small, guilty, and desperate for forgiveness. But all it did was make the anger in my chest harden into a cold, heavy stone. They didn't want an explanation. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a scapegoat. Later that morning, my mom announced, her voice devoid of emotion, "We're going to the hospital to see Mia. You're coming." It wasn't a question. It was a command. Part of me didn't want to go, didn't want to face the pitying or accusing looks, but a much larger part of me desperately needed to see Mia, to know for myself that she was okay. The car ride was excruciating. 10 minutes of absolute silence. My mom stared straight ahead, her jaw clenched. Mark drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. I sat in the back, feeling like a prisoner being transported to his sentencing. Maple Creek General Hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet suffering. We walked down a long, polished corridor until we found Mia's room. She was in a bed by the window, her left leg propped up on a pillow, encased in a bright pink cast from her ankle to her thigh. She looked small and pale against the white sheets, but her face lit up when she saw us. "Mom, Mark." Then her eyes found me, and she gave me a small, shy smile. "Hi, Leo." All the anger I felt towards my mother just evaporated in that moment, replaced by a wave of pure, aching sadness for this little girl. I walked over to her bed, my feet feeling heavy. "Hey, Mia," I said softly. "How are you feeling?" "It hurts a little," she said, pointing to her cast. "But they gave me this button I can press for medicine. And look." She held up her cast, showing me the doodles her friends had already drawn on it. Sarah drew a heart. My mom was standing at the foot of the bed, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I reached out and gently touched the part of the cast that was still blank. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," I said, and I meant it more than anything I had ever said. Mia just shrugged, a simple, innocent gesture that broke my heart. "It's okay. The doctor said I'll be able to walk again. I just have to be careful." My mom chose that moment to speak. "It's nice of you to finally show some concern," she said, her voice dripping with ice. I ignored her, keeping my eyes on Mia. "That's a cool cast. You think I could sign it?" Mia's eyes widened. "Really? Sure. I'm a terrible artist, but I can probably manage my own name." She giggled, a small, sweet sound in the sterile room. It was the first normal sound I had heard in 24 hours. For a few minutes, I helped her with a puzzle, and we talked about her favorite cartoons. It felt like a tiny island of normalcy in an ocean of tension. But my mom and Mark were always there, standing guard, their silent judgment hanging in the air, reminding me that this was all my fault. When we got back in the car, the silence descended again, even heavier than before. As soon as we got home, I went straight to my room and closed the door. I pulled out my phone and called my dad. He picked up on the first ring. "Leo, are you okay? I've been so worried." Hearing his calm, reasonable voice was like a dam breaking inside me. The whole story came pouring out: the voicemail, the fight, the silent treatment, the hospital visit. I told him everything. He listened patiently, letting me finish without interruption. When I was done, all I could hear was his heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "I'm so sorry, son," he said, his voice laced with frustration. "I tore into her last night. I told her she was being completely irrational, that she had no right to put this on you. It's her fault for not having a better plan, for not even calling to confirm with you." "What did she say?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "She said I was coddling you, that I was teaching you to be selfish and irresponsible." She hung up on me. He paused. "Look, Leo, this is going to be rough. She's hurt and she's scared. And when your mom gets scared, she gets mean. She lashes out. And right now, you're her target. So what do I do? I pleaded. I have to stay here for another week and a half. I don't think I can take it. Dad, you just have to hold on, he said, and I could hear the helplessness in his own voice. Be polite. Don't engage in the fights. Lay low. When it's your week to come home, you come home, and we'll figure things out from there. Just know that you did nothing wrong. This is not on you. Do you hear me? I hear you, I said. But it was hard to believe when the entire world I was living in was telling me the opposite. The days that followed were the longest of my life. My dad was right. My mom had found her target, and she never let me forget it. Mia came home from the hospital a few days later, and the house transformed into a shrine to her injury. There were crutches by the door, a special chair in the living room, a ramp mark built over the front steps, and every single one of these new additions was a fresh accusation aimed at me. Mia would struggle to get up from the couch, and my mom would rush over, shooting me a venomous glare over her shoulder as she helped her. Here, sweetie, let me help. We can't have you getting hurt again. Meal times were the worst. We'd sit at the dinner table in that thick, choking silence. My mom would talk only to Mia and Mark, asking them about their day. Her voice light and cheerful. She would talk around me, as if I were a ghost at the table. If I asked for the salt, she would slide it across the table without a word, her eyes fixed on her plate. Mark was her silent accomplice. He adopted her coldness, answering my questions with one-word answers, his face a permanent mask of disapproval. They were a team, a united front of blame, and I was on the other side. The house, once just an uncomfortable place to be, now felt like a prison. My room was my only cell of refuge. I would hide out there for hours, doing homework, listening to music, anything to avoid the suffocating atmosphere downstairs. I stopped taking my camera out. The joy was gone. Looking through the lens felt like a reminder of where I had been when I should have been. Where? At Miller Park? How could I have been somewhere I didn't even know I was supposed to be? One evening, about a week after the accident, I was helping clear the table. Mia was trying to carry her own plate to the sink, determined to be independent. She was moving slowly on her crutches when one of them slipped on the polished floor. She wobbled, letting out a little yelp, and her plate crashed to the ground, shattering into 100 pieces. I immediately rushed to her side. Mia, are you okay? But before I could reach her, my mom was there, swooping in and pushing me aside. She knelt down, checking Mia from head to toe, her voice frantic. Oh my God. Honey, are you all right? Did you fall? Are you hurt? I'm okay, Mom, Mia said, her eyes wide. I just dropped my plate. My mom held her close, stroking her hair. Then she looked up, her eyes finding mine over Mia's shoulder. The look she gave me wasn't just anger. It was pure hatred, as if, somehow, Mia's slipping was also my fault, as if my very presence in the house was a danger to her daughter. She stood up, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Just go to your room, Leo. Just go. You've done enough. I stood there, frozen, surrounded by the shattered pieces of the plate on the floor. It was a perfect metaphor for my life in that house. Broken, sharp, and impossible to put back together. I turned without a word and walked up the stairs, the cold weight in my chest heavier than ever. My dad had told me to hold on, but I was starting to wonder how much more I could take. The final days at my mom's house crawled by with agonizing slowness. I lived like a shadow, moving through the halls as quietly as possible, eating my meals quickly and retreating to the solitude of my room. The house had become a minefield of emotional triggers. Every time I heard Mia grunt with effort as she navigated the stairs, or saw the grimace of pain on her face when she moved her knee the wrong way, a fresh wave of guilt would wash over me. It was an irrational guilt, a phantom limb of responsibility that my brain knew wasn't mine, but my heart couldn't shake. My mom's constant, silent accusations were like a poison, seeping into my thoughts until I started to question my own reality. Maybe I was selfish. Maybe a better person would have somehow known. The day I was supposed to go back to my dad's felt like a parole hearing. I packed my bag with a sense of frantic urgency, stuffing clothes and textbooks into it as if the house were on fire. I just had to make it through a few more hours. As I was zipping up my bag, I heard a soft knock on my door. It wasn't my mom's sharp, impatient rap. It was gentler. "Come in," I said. The door creaked open, and Mia hobbled in on her crutches, her small face serious. She navigated the room carefully and lowered herself onto the edge of my bed. "You're leaving?" she asked, her voice small. "Yeah, it's my week to go to my dad's," I said, trying to sound casual. But my voice was tight. She looked down at her bright pink cast, tracing one of the doodles with her finger. "Oh." We sat in silence for a moment. It wasn't the suffocating silence of my mom and Mark. It was a comfortable, easy quiet. With Mia, there was no judgment. "I'm sorry everyone's so mad," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and sincere. "It's not your fault. You know." Her words hit me like a physical blow. To hear someone in this house, this epicenter of blame, say those four simple words was so unexpected it almost brought me to tears. "Thanks, Mia," I managed to say, my throat thick. That means a lot." She nodded, then looked at me with a child's unfiltered curiosity. "Mom said you were supposed to pick me up. She said she told you." I sighed, sitting down on the bed next to her. What was I supposed to say? How do you explain to a 10-year-old that her mother, my mother, was the source of all this pain? "She texted me," I said carefully, "but I was at my photo club, and my phone was on silent. I didn't see the message until it was too late." Mia seemed to be thinking this over. "Oh, you like your photo club?" "Yeah, I do." Then she said something that changed everything. It was a small detail, an innocent, offhand comment, but it was like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know existed. "Mommy Sarah told me you were definitely coming," she said, her voice certain, "when Mrs. Gable, my troop leader, asked if I needed a ride. Mom told her no. She said, 'Leo is on his way. He'll be here any minute.' She told me to just wait for you right by the big oak tree." The air left my lungs. I stared at her, my mind racing to process what she had just said. It wasn't just that my mom had sent me a text. It wasn't just an assumption. It was a concrete action. She had actively declined a safe ride home for Mia. She had told a 10-year-old child and another adult a direct, unequivocal lie. "Leo is on his way." She hadn't said, "I've asked Leo," or "I hope Leo can make it." She had presented it as a fact, a certainty. In that moment, the entire narrative shifted. The heavy stone of irrational guilt in my chest didn't just crack. It shattered. It was replaced by a cold, sharp, and intensely clear anger. This wasn't about her being a poor planner or overly demanding. This was a level of negligence that was staggering. She hadn't just failed to arrange a ride. She had actively prevented one, banking on my blind obedience to a message I hadn't even received. She had gambled with her own stepdaughter's safety and lost. And for the past week and a half, she had been systematically trying to make me pay for her losing bet. "Leo," Mia asked, her small voice pulling me out of my stunned silence. "Are you okay? You look weird." I forced a smile, but it felt brittle, like it could break. "I'm fine, Mia. Just thinking." I stood up and slung my backpack over my shoulder. "Hey, you take it easy, okay? Don't let them bully you into walking on that thing too much." She giggled. "I won't." I gave her a quick, one-armed hug, being careful of her cast. "I'll see you soon." As I walked down the stairs, I felt different, taller. The weight was gone. I wasn't a guilty party anymore. I was a victim of a colossal injustice, and the anger I felt was righteous and clean. My mom was waiting at the bottom of the stairs, her arms crossed, her face set in its usual mask of disapproval. "Your father is on his way," she said, her voice clipped. "He'll be here in 5 minutes." "Okay," I said, my voice steady. I walked past her and stood by the front door, waiting. I didn't want to be in the same room with her for a second longer than I had to. She followed me, unable to resist one last parting shot. "I hope you use your time at your father's to think about what you've done," she said. "I hope you reflect on the consequences of your selfishness." I turned to face her. For the first time in 2 weeks, I looked her directly in the eye. The fear was gone. The intimidation was gone. I saw her not as a powerful, judgmental authority figure, but as a weak, terrified person who would rather destroy her own son than admit she had made a catastrophic mistake. "I will be doing a lot of thinking, Mom," I said, and my voice was so calm it seemed to surprise her, "but not about my selfishness. I'll be thinking about yours." Her eyes widened in shock. Before she could form a response, a car horn honked outside. My dad was here. "Salvation. That's my ride," I said. I opened the front door and walked out without a backward glance, leaving her standing there, speechless, in the silent, immaculate house. The car ride to my dad's was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet, a healing quiet. I just stared out the window at the passing scenery, Mia's words replaying in my mind. "Leo is on his way." My dad seemed to sense that something had shifted. He didn't push me to talk. He just drove, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on the center console. When we pulled into his driveway, he turned off the engine and finally spoke. "You look different," he said, studying my face. "I am," I said. I turned to him, and the whole story, the new and final piece of the puzzle, came tumbling out. I told him what Mia had said. I told him about the lie. As I spoke, I watched my dad's expression change from concern to disbelief, and then to a slow, burning anger that I had rarely seen in him. He was a calm man, a man who measured his words, but what I was telling him pushed him past that point. When I finished, he just shook his head, his jaw tight. I knew it was bad. "Leo, I didn't know it was that bad. That's not just poor planning. That's reckless endangerment. She lied to a child and put her directly in harm's way." He ran a hand through his hair, looking utterly defeated. "And she's been letting you carry the weight of that, of her mistake." He hit the steering wheel with the heel of his hand. A short, sharp thud. "Damn it, Sarah, I can't go back there." "Dad," I said, the words coming out with a finality that surprised even me. "I mean it. I can't live like that. I can't spend half my life walking on eggshells, being blamed for things that aren't my fault. I'm done." My dad looked at me, his eyes searching mine. He saw the resolve there. He saw that this wasn't a teenager being dramatic. This was a fundamental shift, a boundary being drawn not in the sand, but in concrete. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "Okay, son. You don't have to." He didn't say, "We'll talk about it," or "Let's see how things go." He just said, "Okay." It was the simplest, most powerful validation I could have asked for. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means you stay here," he said. "We'll have to get lawyers involved, sort out the custody agreement. It'll get messy. Your mother will fight it. She'll make it ugly. But if you're sure this is what you want, I'll back you up 100%. We'll do whatever it takes." I felt a profound sense of relief, so overwhelming it almost made me dizzy. It was the feeling of a heavy pack being lifted from your shoulders after a long and grueling hike. "I'm sure," I said, my voice clear and strong. My dad nodded, a grim determination on his face. "All right then, let's get you inside. It sounds like you and I need to make a plan." As we walked towards the familiar, comforting clutter of his house, I knew that the battle was far from over. In fact, the hardest part was probably still to come. But for the first time since I'd heard that voicemail, I felt like I wasn't fighting it alone. And I wasn't fighting to defend myself anymore. I was fighting for my future. The first few days at my dad's house were like waking from a long, stressful dream. The air itself felt different, lighter. I could breathe again. I could walk into the kitchen for a glass of water without bracing for a hostile glare. I could sit in the living room and read a book without the oppressive weight of someone's silent disapproval pressing down on me. My dad was true to his word. He gave me space, but he was a constant, steady presence. He made my favorite meal cheesy baked ziti and burgers on the grill. We didn't talk about my mom or the situation constantly, but it was an undercurrent to everything. We were in a new phase, a planning phase, and there was a quiet intensity to our conversations. She's going to paint you as the villain in this. He warned me one evening as we were cleaning up after dinner. She'll tell everyone you're an ungrateful, uncaring kid who abandoned his mother and his injured stepsister. Let her, I said, scrubbing a plate with more force than necessary. Anyone who actually knows me won't believe it. And anyone who believes it, I guess I don't need them in my life anyway. My dad smiled, a sad, proud kind of smile. You've grown up a lot in the last few weeks, Leo. I didn't feel grown up. I felt old. I felt like the carefree parts of my childhood had been scraped away, leaving something harder and more cynical behind. True to my dad's prediction, the first salvo from my mother arrived 2 days after I'd left her house. It was a text message, long and rambling, a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Mom, I can't believe you would just leave like this. After everything I've done for you. Mia asks about you every day. She doesn't understand why her big brother ran away when she needed him most. Your behavior is cruel, Leo. Not just to me, but to her. You're letting your father poison you against your own family. I hope you're happy with your decision to tear us all apart. I read the text, and I felt nothing. A month ago, a message like that would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-doubt. Now, it was just words on a screen, transparent and pathetic. I showed it to my dad. He read it, his lips tightening into a thin line. Block her number. Leo. What? The suggestion was so radical, it caught me off guard. For now, just for a little while, he said, handing the phone back to me. You need a break. You need to heal without her constantly picking at the wound. I'll be the point of contact. She can talk to me, or to my lawyer. The idea was terrifying and liberating all at once. To sever that digital tether, the one that had been used to control and harass me for years, it felt like a final, definitive act. I opened my contacts, found her name, and pressed the button. Block this caller. A small pop-up asked me to confirm. I did. It was done. The line had gone silent. But this time, it was on my terms. The next week was a blur of legalities. My dad met with his lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Davies. I had a meeting with her too. She asked me to tell her the entire story, from the constant texting during school to the conversation with Mia. I told her everything, my voice steady and clear. She listened, taking notes, her expression neutral. Your mother's actions constitute a pattern of emotional manipulation and negligence, she said when I was finished, her tone matter of fact. The incident with Mia is the most egregious example. We have a strong case to amend the custody agreement, to make your father the primary residential parent. It felt strange to hear our messy, painful family drama reduced to legal terms. Emotional manipulation, negligence. But it was also validating. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. What had happened was real, and it was wrong. The school also became involved. My dad contacted my guidance counselor, Mrs. Albright, and with my permission, explained the situation. He told her about my mom's history of calling the school, of demanding I answer texts during class. Mrs. Albright was horrified. Leo, I am so sorry, she said to me in a private meeting. We knew your mom could be insistent. We had no idea it was this extreme. Of course, we will support you. The school's policy is clear. A student's primary focus during school hours should be their education. We will provide a statement to that effect for your lawyer if needed. Every piece of support was like another stone being added to the wall I was building around myself. A wall of truth, of validation. My dad, Ms. Davies, Mrs. Albright were all reinforcing the same message, You have a right to your own life. You have a right to be safe. But as the legal machinery began to turn, the personal fallout was just beginning. My mom, unable to reach me directly, went on the offensive. She called my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles. She told them her version of the story, a tragic tale of a devoted mother being abandoned by a cold-hearted son, all because he was too lazy to run a simple errand. The phone calls started coming to my dad's house. My Aunt Carol, my mom's sister, was the first. "David, what on earth is going on?" She'd demanded. "Sarah is a wreck. She says Leo just packed up and left without a word, right after poor little Mia got home from the hospital. How could you let him do that?" My dad was patient, but firm. "Carol, you're only hearing one side of the story, and it's a lot more complicated than that." Complicated? It sounds pretty simple to me. A boy's place is with his mother, especially during a crisis. It was like talking to a brick wall. My mom had gotten to them first, and her narrative was simpler, more dramatic. It was easier to believe in a selfish teenager than a negligent mother. The pressure began to mount. I started getting texts from cousins I hadn't spoken to in months. "Dude, what's up with you and your mom? That's cold." I felt like I was being tried in the court of family opinion, and I was losing. The worst part was Mia. My mom started using her as a pawn. She would send my dad pictures of Mia looking sad, with captions like, "She misses her brother so much." She arranged a video call between Mia and my dad, and halfway through, my mom made sure Mia asked, right on cue, "When is Leo coming home?" Seeing her little face on the screen, looking confused and sad, was a knife in my gut. My mom knew it, too. She was aiming for my weakest point. After one particularly brutal call where Mia was clearly upset, I broke down. Maybe I should just go back. I told my dad, my voice thick with tears. "This is hurting everyone. It's hurting Mia. Maybe it's not worth it." My dad sat down next to me on the couch and put a firm hand on my shoulder. "Don't," he said, his voice quiet but intense. "Don't you dare fall for it. This is what she does. Leo, she uses guilt like a weapon. Going back won't fix anything. It will just teach her that her tactics work. It will teach her that if she hurts Mia enough, she can control you. Do you want that to be your future? Do you want Mia to grow up learning that her feelings are just tools for her mother to use?" His words were harsh, but they were true. He was right. Going back wouldn't make things better. It would make them infinitely worse in the long run. I wiped my eyes and nodded. "No," I said. "I don't want that." "Good," he said. "Then we keep fighting, no matter how ugly she makes it." The climax of my mother's campaign came a few days later. It was a Saturday. I was in my room, trying to edit some photos I had taken around my dad's neighborhood. There was a knock on the front door. I didn't think much of it until I heard the voices. My dad's voice, low and angry, and another voice, my mom's. My blood ran cold. I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding. I could see them in the entryway. My mom was standing on the doorstep, and she wasn't alone. Mark was behind her, his arms crossed, looking like a grim bodyguard, and standing between them, holding onto my mom's hand, was Mia, on her crutches. My mom had brought Mia to the front door like a prop. "I'm not having this conversation here, Sarah," my dad was saying, his body blocking the doorway. "I'm not leaving until I speak to my son," my mother said, her voice high and theatrical, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "He has been stolen from me. You can't just keep him locked up in there. Nobody is locked up. He doesn't want to see you," my dad said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Let him tell me that himself," she challenged. Leo, I know you can hear me. Come down here and talk to your mother." Mia looked up at my dad, her face pale and frightened. "I want to see Leo," she whispered. My dad's resolve seemed to crack at the sight of her. He sighed, running a hand over his face. He looked up the stairs and saw me standing there. His eyes were filled with a mixture of anger and apology. I knew I couldn't hide. This was a confrontation I couldn't avoid. Taking a deep breath, I walked down the stairs. When my mom saw me, her face transformed. She put on a show of tearful relief. "Oh, Leo. Thank God. I was so worried. Come on, sweetie. Let's go home. We can talk about all of this at home." She reached for my hand. I took a step back, out of her reach. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice shaking slightly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "This is my home now." My mother flinched as if I'd struck her. The mask of the grieving victim slipped, and for a second, I saw the raw, furious woman from the night of the accident. Her hand, which had been reaching for mine, dropped to her side. "What did you just say?" she asked, her voice dangerously low. Mark took a step forward. "Show your mother some respect." "Leo, I'm showing her exactly the amount of respect she's shown me." I shot back, my eyes locked on hers. I could feel my dad's presence behind me, a silent, solid wall of support. It gave me the strength to stand my ground. "This is not your home," my mom said, her voice rising again, regaining its theatrical tremor. "This is a place your father has filled with lies. Our home is with me, with your family, with Mia." She gestured down at the little girl beside her, who was looking back and forth between us, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. It was a calculated, cruel move, and it made my stomach turn. "Stop using her," I said, my voice cold. "Using her?" My mom gasped, placing a hand on her chest in mock horror. "How dare you? I brought her here because she misses you, because she is the innocent victim in all of this, the one who is suffering the most because of your selfish tantrum. She's suffering because you lied to her." The words exploded out of me, louder than I intended. The carefully constructed calm I had been holding onto for weeks finally shattered. "She's suffering because you told her I was on my way. You told her to wait alone. You declined a safe ride for her. This entire nightmare happened because of you, and you alone." A shocked silence fell over the doorstep. My mom just stared at me, her mouth slightly agape. Mark looked stunned. Even my dad, who knew the truth, seemed taken aback by the force of my outburst. Mia was the one who broke the silence. She looked up at my mom, her small face crumpled in confusion. "What does he mean? Mommy Sarah, you told me Leo was coming." My mother's face went white. She had been exposed. Her own lie, spoken back to her by the two people she had wronged, right there on the doorstep for the whole neighborhood to witness. For a moment, she looked completely lost. Her carefully crafted narrative had been ripped to shreds. Then, the panic in her eyes was replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. She turned her fury not on me, but on my dad. "This is what you've done," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at him. "You've twisted him. You've poisoned my son against me. You were always jealous of my new family, of the fact that I could be happy without you. This has nothing to do with me, Sarah," my dad said, his voice a low growl. "This is about you and your inability to take responsibility for anything. You made a mistake, a terrible one, and instead of owning it, you tried to destroy your son to cover it up. He just isn't letting you." Mark finally found his voice. He stepped in front of my mom, puffing out his chest. "I think you've said enough. David, we're here to get Leo. He's 16 years old," my dad said, not backing down an inch. "He's old enough to decide where he wants to be, and he's decided he doesn't want to be in a house where he's treated like a scapegoat. You are not welcome here. Now take Mia and go home." My mom looked at me, her eyes pleading now, trying one last, desperate tactic. "Leo, please," she whispered, tears welling up. "Don't do this to us. Don't do this to our family." I looked at her, at the tears that I now knew she could turn on and off like a faucet. I looked at Mark, her silent enabler, and then I looked at Mia, who was watching me, her expression heartbreakingly lost. I knew that whatever I did next would define the rest of our lives. If I caved, I would be trapped forever in this cycle of guilt and manipulation. If I held firm, I might lose what was left of my family, but I would gain myself. There is no us anymore. Mom, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You destroyed it, not me. That was it. The final blow. I saw the last bit of hope drain from her face. She looked utterly defeated. She grabbed Mia's hand, her grip probably a little too tight. Fine, she hissed, the tears vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. Fine. You've made your choice. Don't come crawling back to me when you realize what you've thrown away. She turned, practically dragging Mia with her. Mark shot one last glare at my dad and me before following them to their car. I watched them go, a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. I had won. This was the victory I had been fighting for. So why did it feel so much like a loss? My dad put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing, Leo. The hardest thing, but the right thing. I just nodded, unable to speak. I watched their car pull away from the curb and disappear down the street. The silence they left behind was profound. The war on the doorstep was over. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The next day, my dad got a call from my mom's lawyer. She was filing for sole custody, claiming my dad was an alienating parent and that I was an emotionally unstable minor. She was painting a picture of a kidnapping, of a vulnerable child being brainwashed. It's a scare tactic, Ms. Davies assured us over the phone. It's baseless, and it won't hold up in court, especially with the school's testimony and Mia's own words. But she's going to make this as painful and as public as possible. She was right. The battle moved from the front lawn to legal documents and hushed phone calls. My mother's side of the family completely cut me off. My Aunt Carol sent my dad a long, vicious email accusing him of being a monster. It felt like my world was shrinking, the circle of people I could trust tightening around me and my dad. Through it all, the one person I couldn't stop thinking about was Mia. I felt a deep, wrenching guilt not for the accident, but for the position I had put her in. She was trapped in that house with them, with my mom's bitterness and Mark's resentment. I had escaped, but she was still a prisoner. One night, I was lying in bed, unable to sleep, when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. A text message. Unknown. Hi Leo, it's me, Mia. My heart leaped. I had no idea how she'd gotten my number. Me. Hey Mia. Are you okay? The three dots appeared and disappeared for a long time. Finally, a message came through. Mia, I miss you. Mom is sad all the time now. She cries a lot. Me, I'm sorry to hear that. I miss you too. Mia, are you ever coming home? The question was so simple, so innocent, and it tore me apart. How could I explain this to her? How could I tell her that the reason I couldn't come home was the very person she was living with? Me, it's complicated. Mia, but it's not because I don't want to see you. I promise. Mia, okay. I have to go. Mom will see. The conversation ended. I stared at the screen, a new kind of resolve forming within me. This wasn't just about me anymore. My mom's behavior wasn't just affecting me. It was hurting Mia, too. It was creating a toxic environment for a child who had already been through a traumatic experience. I got out of bed and went downstairs. My dad was in the living room, reading. Dad, I said, my voice resolute. I need to do something. He looked up. What is it? The court hearing, I said. The custody hearing. I want to speak. I want to tell the judge, in my own words, what happened. All of it. Not just for me. For Mia. My dad studied my face for a long moment. He saw the determination there, the steel that had been forged in the fire of the last month. He closed his book and set it aside. All right, Leo, he said, his voice filled with a quiet pride. If that's what you need to do, then that's what we'll do. I knew then that the final confrontation wasn't going to be on a doorstep or over the phone. It was going to be in a courtroom, under oath, and this time, the truth would be the only thing that mattered. The weeks leading up to the court date were a strange mix of calm and anxiety. At home with my dad, life settled into a new normal. We found a rhythm. He'd make coffee in the morning. I'd handle dinner. We'd watch old movies in the evening. The comfortable silence between us a healing balm. I started taking my camera out again, exploring the woods behind my dad's house, finding solace in the quiet patience of photography. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a regular 16-year-old. But beneath the surface, the anxiety simmered. The hearing loomed like a final exam for my life. Ms. Davies prepped me for it. Her office a stark contrast to the chaos of my emotions. It was all beige walls and leather-bound books, a world of order and logic. You'll be speaking to a judge, Leo, not a jury, she explained, her voice calm and professional. You don't need to be dramatic. You just need to be honest. Speak your truth, clearly and concisely. The facts are on your side. What if they don't believe me? I asked, the old fear creeping back in. What if my mom cries and the judge feels sorry for her? Judges have seen a lot of tears. Leo, she said with a wry smile. They're trained to look past the performance and see the facts. Your mother's pattern of behavior, the school's testimony, and the core fact that she misled her own stepdaughter about a safe ride home. That's a very powerful narrative. Your job is just to tell it. I spent hours in my room, going over what I would say. I didn't write a script. Ms. Davies had advised against it. She said it needed to come from the heart. So I just thought about it, replaying the events in my mind, not as a source of trauma anymore, but as a sequence of facts, the constant texts, the demand to wait in the rain, the final, fateful message, the voicemail, the lie Mia had unknowingly revealed. It was all there, a straight, undeniable line. The day of the hearing was gray and overcast, the Ohio sky the color of slate. It matched my mood perfectly. My dad and I drove to the courthouse in downtown Columbus. He tried to make small talk, but we both knew it was pointless. The air in the car was thick with unspoken tension. Whatever happens in there, Leo, he said as he parked the car, I'm proud of you. You know that, right? I know. Dad, I said, my voice hoarse. Thanks. The courtroom was smaller and less intimidating than I had imagined from movies. It was just a wood-paneled room with a few rows of benches. My mom was already there, sitting with Mark and her lawyer. She looked different. She was wearing a conservative gray dress, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked smaller, more fragile. When she saw me walk in, her eyes widened, and she gave a little start, as if she was shocked to see me. It was all part of the performance. The wounded mother. I sat with my dad and Ms. Davies at the table opposite them. I didn't look at her again. I focused on the judge's bench, on the polished wood, on the American flag standing in the corner. The proceedings began. A drone of legalese that went mostly over my head. The lawyers made their opening statements. My mom's lawyer painted a picture of a loving, if slightly over-anxious, mother whose son had been cruelly turned against her by a bitter ex-husband. Ms. Davies countered with a calm, fact-based timeline of my mother's escalating control and negligence. Then it was my turn. The court calls Leo Parker to the stand. The bailiff said. My heart hammered against my ribs. My palms were slick with sweat. My dad gave my shoulder a firm squeeze. You've got this, he whispered. I walked to the witness stand, every eye in the room on me. I sat down and was sworn in. The judge was an older woman with kind, intelligent eyes. She looked at me not with pity, but with a calm, professional attention. Ms. Davies approached. Leo, she began, her voice gentle. Can you please tell the court, in your own words, what your relationship with your mother has been like over the past year? And so I did. I started with the texting, how it felt to be constantly interrupted at school, how my teachers and my father had encouraged me to set a boundary by silencing my phone. I spoke about the constant errands, the expectation that my time was not my own. My mom's lawyer objected. Relevance. Your Honor, this sounds like typical teenage complaints. Overruled. The judge said, her eyes still on me. Let the boy speak. I want to understand the context. That gave me courage. I continued. my voice growing stronger. I told them about the night she made me wait for an hour in the cold for Mia. And then, I got to the day of the accident. I laid it all out, step by step. The photo club meeting, the silenced phone, finding the messages, the voicemail, the fight that night. My mom started to cry softly at her table, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on the judge. And Leo. Ms. Davies said, her voice soft but clear, "Did you feel responsible for what happened to Mia?" At first, yes, I admitted. I felt horrible. I still do, for what she went through. But I didn't understand how it could be my fault when I never even knew I was supposed to be there. And did anything happen to change your understanding of that day? This was it. The heart of the matter. Yes, I said. A few days later, I was talking to my stepsister, Mia. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my mother stiffen. And what did Mia tell you? She told me that my mom had told her, and her troop leader, that I was definitely on my way to pick her up. Not that she had asked me to, but that I was coming. She said my mom told her to wait for me, and that she even turned down an offer of a ride for Mia from another parent because she was so sure I would be there. A low gasp came from my mother's side of the room. Her lawyer immediately stood up. Objection. Hearsay. The child isn't here to testify. Your Honor. Ms. Davies countered smoothly. This isn't being offered to prove the truth of what the child said, but to explain my client's state of mind and the subsequent actions he took. It explains why he felt he could no longer reside in his mother's home. It speaks directly to the core issue of trust and safety. The judge considered this for a moment. I'll allow it. Objection overruled. I finished my story, explaining how that revelation had made me realize that I was being made the scapegoat for my mother's own lie and negligence. I explained how the atmosphere in the house had become unbearable, how I was constantly blamed and emotionally punished. I love my mother, I said, and my voice cracked for the first time. I took a breath to steady it. But I can't live in that house anymore. It's not safe for me, not for my mental health. All I'm asking is to be allowed to live with my dad, where I feel supported and respected. And I'm worried about Mia, too. I don't think that's a healthy place for her either, to be around all that anger and blame. When I finished, the room was completely silent. I had said my piece. I had spoken my truth. I felt utterly drained, but also strangely light. Whatever happened now, I had done what I came to do. My mother's lawyer tried to cross-examine me, tried to paint me as a dramatic, oversensitive teenager who was angry at his mom for simple rules. But his questions felt weak, his arguments hollow. I just answered them honestly and calmly. The truth was my shield. When it was over, I walked back to my seat, my legs trembling. My dad put his arm around me and pulled me close. I leaned my head on his shoulder, completely spent. The judge called for a recess before she would make her ruling. As we were filing out of the courtroom, my mom rushed towards me. Her lawyer and Mark tried to hold her back, but she pushed past them. Her face was a mess of tears and makeup. "Leo, how could you?" she whispered, her voice raw with anguish. "How could you say those things? In front of all these people. I'm your mother." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger or fear. I just felt a deep, profound sadness. "You're right," I said, my voice quiet. "You are my mother, and you were supposed to protect me. Instead, you tried to sacrifice me to protect yourself." Her face crumpled. She had no answer. Mark pulled her away, and I watched them go. A broken little family unit heading for a future I was no longer a part of. The sadness was overwhelming, but underneath it, there was something else, too. A tiny, fragile seed of peace. We sat on a hard wooden bench in the courthouse hallway, waiting. The minutes stretched into an eternity. My dad bought us lukewarm coffee from a vending machine, and we sipped it in silence. I kept replaying the scene in the courtroom over and over in my head. Had I said the right things? Was my voice steady enough? Did the judge believe me? My mom's devastated face was burned into my memory. A part of me, a small, childish part that still craved her approval, felt a pang of guilt for causing her that pain. But the larger part of me, the part that had been forced to grow up so quickly, knew that the pain was of her own making. I had simply held up a mirror. Finally, Ms. Davies came out to find us. Her expression was calm, unreadable. My stomach did a nervous flip. "The judge is ready," she said simply. We filed back into the courtroom and took our seats. The air was thick with anticipation. My mom and Mark were already at their table. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared straight ahead at the judge's bench, her hands clenched in her lap. The judge entered, and we all rose. She sat down, put on her glasses, and looked down at the papers in front of her. The silence was absolute. I have reviewed the existing custody arrangement and listened to the testimony provided today. She began, her voice clear and authoritative. These cases are always difficult, especially when they involve a child who is old enough to articulate their own needs and desires. She looked directly at my mom. "Mrs. Collins," she said, using Mark's last name, "I do not doubt your love for your son. However, your behavior, as described not only by your son, but also corroborated by the school, demonstrates a significant and concerning lack of respect for his personal boundaries." My mom flinched as if the words were a physical blow. The judge continued, her tone becoming sterner. "Your actions on the day of your stepdaughter's accident are particularly troubling. Relying on a text message to arrange for the care of a 10-year-old child, without any confirmation, is poor judgment, but to then actively mislead that child into believing her ride was secured, causing her to reject a safer alternative, that crosses the line from poor judgment into negligence." My mom let out a small, choked sob. Mark put a comforting hand on her back, but he was staring at the floor. "The attempt to place the blame for this unfortunate incident entirely on your 16-year-old son has created a toxic and untenable living environment," the judge said, her gaze shifting to me. "Leo," she said, and her voice softened slightly, "I believe you have shown a great deal of maturity in a very difficult situation." She looked back down at her papers. "Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that the existing custody agreement is hereby amended. David Parker will be granted sole legal and residential custody of the minor child. Leo Parker, Sarah Collins will be granted visitation rights every other weekend and on alternating holidays, contingent upon the completion of a court-mandated family counseling program, to include both Mrs. Collins and her son, should he agree to participate." The words hung in the air. Sole custody. I had won. It was over. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. I felt my dad's hand grip my shoulder, his fingers digging in slightly. I looked at him, and he had tears in his eyes. He pulled me into a fierce hug, right there in the courtroom. Across the room, my mom was completely still, her face a mask of disbelief. Then, a low, guttural sound of despair escaped her lips. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent, racking sobs. Mark just sat beside her, looking helpless and defeated. The performance was over. This was real. This was the consequence. Walking out of the courthouse felt surreal. The gray, overcast sky hadn't changed, but it felt like the world was in color again. I could breathe. The weight that I had been carrying for so long, the weight of her demands, her expectations, and her blame, was finally gone. "Let's go home," my dad said, his voice thick with emotion. And for the first time, the word home had only one simple, unambiguous meaning. The months that followed were quiet, healing. I settled into life at my dad's house, and it stopped feeling like a refuge and started feeling like a real home. My room, once a temporary sanctuary, became my own. I filled it with my photos, my books, my clutter. I had friends over. We'd order pizza and play video games in the living room, and my dad would just smile and retreat to his workshop. He gave me freedom, but more importantly, he gave me trust. I didn't hear from my mom, She didn't call or text. The court-ordered silence was absolute. According to Ms. Davies, she had enrolled in the mandatory counseling. But that was all we knew. I did, however, keep in touch with Mia. We texted occasionally, using the secret number she had gotten. Our conversations were simple, mostly about her school, her friends, how her leg was healing. She was walking without crutches now, though she still had a noticeable limp. She never mentioned my mom, and I never asked. It was our unspoken agreement, our little island of peace. About 6 months after the hearing, on a crisp autumn Saturday, I got a text. It was from an unknown number. Unknown, Leo. It's your mother. My therapist suggested I reach out. I know you blocked my old number. My heart started to beat a little faster. I showed the text to my dad. He read it, his expression thoughtful. It's up to you, he said. You don't have to answer. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about ignoring it, about blocking this number too. It would be the easy thing to do, but something made me hesitate. I typed out a simple, one-word reply. Me, okay. A minute later, another text came through. Mom, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. For blaming you. You were right. It wasn't your fault. It was mine. I stared at the words on the screen. The words I had longed to hear for so long. They didn't bring the rush of vindication I might have expected. They just felt quiet and sad. Me, thank you for saying that. Mom, the judge said visitation could start once I finished the first part of my therapy. I've finished. I was wondering if you would be willing to see me. We could get a coffee or just talk. I thought about all the anger, all the pain. I thought about the cold silences and the screaming accusations. And I thought about the sad, broken woman in the courtroom. Forgiveness felt like a distant country I wasn't ready to visit. But understanding, maybe that was a journey I could start. Me, I don't know. I need to think about it. MOM, of course. I understand. The offer is there whenever you're ready. No pressure. No pressure. It was a phrase I had never heard from her before. Maybe she really was changing. Or maybe she was just learning a new language to get what she wanted. I didn't know. The next day, I drove myself to my old neighborhood. I parked my car down the street from my mom's house, the house that used to be partially mine. I saw Mia in the front yard, throwing a ball for a new puppy. She was running, her limp still there but less pronounced. She looked happy. As I watched, the front door opened. My mom came out and sat on the porch steps. She didn't have her phone in her hand. She just sat there, watching her stepdaughter play. She looked peaceful. For a moment, she looked up, her eyes scanning the street, and they passed right over my car without seeing me. I started the engine and drove away. I don't know if I'll ever have a real relationship with my mother again. Some things, once they're broken, can't be perfectly pieced back together. The cracks will always show. But for the first time, I felt like the future was a choice, not a sentence. The line was no longer silent with anger and resentment. It was quiet with possibility. I got home and picked up my camera. The late afternoon light was beautiful, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn. I looked through the viewfinder, focused on a single, perfect autumn leaf, and for the first time in a very long time, the world felt completely, peacefully, silent, and the silence was all my own.